Welcome to Off the Mat. I'm Christy, a yoga teacher and seasonal retreat host. And in this podcast, I share honest conversations with people I admire about how yoga goes far beyond the physical poses. In the West, we often forget that movement's just one part of this ancient practice. But what keeps us coming back? The emotional shifts, the perspective changes, the clarity, the deep self-understanding. From the day-to-day stresses to the large, looming, unanswered questions, yoga has truly changed the way I view the world and myself within it. I hope that these conversations can spark a curiosity in you and help you off the mat too. So my first guest today is a man called Richard Knight, a yoga teacher and humanist celebrant based in Southeast London. Our conversation was packed full of wisdom, and I honestly learned so much. From life-changing career moves, being inclusive within a yoga practice, and sharing so many excellent resources, it was an honor to speak to Richard. Let's dive into episode 1 of Off the Mat. Welcome to today's episode of Off the Mat podcast. I'm here with Richard Knight today, and I'm very excited to jump into today's episode. So I'm going to hand over to Richard, who is going to start us with a little meditation. And the idea is that this meditation is going to allow you to really drop into listening wherever you are. So over to you, Richard.
Thanks so much, Christy. Excited to be here. And thank you everyone who's listening, wherever you are and whatever time of day. So as Christy said, I'm just going to start with a short mindful meditation. I think often when we're listening to podcasts, it's on the go and life generally tends to be quite hectic. So let's take a little moment to just settle and ground. So with that being said, if you're comfortable to close the eyes, let the eyes close down. If you're standing, that's totally fine. If you're seated or kneeling, or even if you're lying down, to be honest, that's absolutely fine. Taking a long, slow breath in through the nose. And then neither let that one go out the mouth or the nose. Another one like that. This time we're going to hold at the top of the breath. Just feel that kind of gathered tension in the body. And as you breathe it out, feel that tension release as you sink a little deeper into the ground, the seat, wherever you are. Then bring awareness to your main point of contact with the earth. So if you're standing, probably your feet. If you're seated, your sit bones, center of the pelvis. And just allow yourself to root down from that space. So really feel a sense of heaviness, a sense of earthing. And then could you let that feeling just wash out through the rest of your body? Particularly those places where we tend to hold tension, so around the shoulders, the jaw, maybe the hip. That you just breathe that tension out and allow softness to settle. Let the attention move next to the breath. Could you just watch the breath come in and watch the breath go out? And that's all we're going to do for the next few moments. Just follow the journey of the breath in. Follow the journey of the breath. Noticing that the mind has pulled away, taken off in time and space to other thoughts. Drawing it back. According to some interpretations, the word yoga can mean to contemplate. So our practice of yoga is practice of contemplation, leading us over time perhaps to a state of meditative absorption. So when we practice meditation, we just keep bringing the attention back, knowing that the mind is just doing what it's made to do. Patiently, kindly training it to settle a little longer, a little quieter. And so now inviting you to take the attention back to that main point of contact with the earth, sit bones or feet, if you're lying down, back body. And now allow that attention radiate outwards to spread through the body. If you can feel the touch of the air, noticing what sounds are around. Bring a mindful reawakening to the senses as you come back, and when you're ready to, perhaps with the chin lowered towards the chest, starting to blink the eyes open and let in the world around you with a new mindful awareness. Thanks, Christy. Hopefully we feel grounded and present for our little interview.
Yeah, very ready to jump right in.
Nice. All right, let's go.
As part of the Off the Mat podcast, I've asked each guest what their favourite drink and snack combination is so that we can enjoy that together, because that is just a lovely way to start. So Richard here wanted an oat flat white and
Basic.
a chocolate covered date with peanut butter and some sea salt. So voila, here you go.
Thank you very much. I feel very spoiled.
As it should be. And I guess we should call out the OG date that you did recommend, which was...
Yeah, so one of the highlights of my week is having coffee and a chocolate-covered date at Yoga Rise, where I teach and where I practice, and made by the lovely Lydia Baker, who's also a wonderful teacher. Yeah, so that's just always a special moment in my week. And so it's really nice that Christy's recreated that for me. Thank you.
I don't know if they'll live up to Lydia's standard, but hopefully they will. Cheers.
Cheers. Good chocolate.
It's Tony's.
Superior and ethical.
So I want to start today's chat and podcast by taking it back and thinking about when you first practiced yoga. Do you remember the first class you ever went to, or even the first class that really landed and really made an impact in your life?
Yeah, so the very first class I went to was about 20 years ago. I was living in Australia and my best friend was like, hey, I'm going to yoga this evening. Do you want to come? And I'm not going to lie, I wasn't ready for it. It didn't land with me. It was, I felt at the time, way too spiritual. I think probably in retrospect, there was just a little bit of kind of introspection and I wasn't really ready for that. But that's always stood with me as a good reminder that as teachers, we have a responsibility not to present our classes in a way that feels inaccessible to people who aren't there yet on their own journey. And so that stayed as a lesson for me, that I try and make my classes like, yes, there's a spiritual element and there's a philosophy element, but it's presented in a way that's an offering, not forcefully. So that was my first class. My second one was a Bikram class. This was a long time ago. It was before anything came out about him. And I loved the feeling of euphoria and I loved the sense of energetic release that came from it. And also the psychological control. I remember the first class freaking out, going, I'm going to faint, I'm going to be sick. And then learning to regulate that and be like, actually, I'm okay. I don't need to drink water. I'm not going to faint. And I do think there's an important lesson there. I'm not a practitioner of Bikram now. I'm not a practitioner of hot yoga either. But yeah, it was a good starting point. And then I left it for quite a while. And really the turning point for me was when I left my previous career in hospitality and I started practicing at good old level 6 in Peckham before the pandemic. And it was like 0 to 100 for me. I went from this very sporadic, occasional, like do a YouTube class or have a free class at work to suddenly practicing 5 times a week and just being immersed in community. And I remember that first class at level 6, really. I'd said to the teacher, the wonderful Will Wheeler, I was like, oh, will there be any guys there? And he's like, yeah, usually it's about 20% guys. It was 29 women and me, and I was sweating like a beast. And I just remember dripping on the woman next to me.
We've all been there.
Yeah, so awful. And I apologized to her after class, and I didn't even notice. And I was like, oh my God, she's so in her practice.
It's so funny, that journey of being in a class, and especially when maybe you're newer to the practice and constantly looking around and thinking, oh gosh, is everyone looking at me? I'm not doing it as well as they're doing it, or I'm sweating loads and that's off-putting the person next to you. And that realization of that woman going, I didn't even notice, and I see that in classes all the time. And that's such a journey to...
The constant reminder, isn't it? Like, to not look at what other people are doing and to not worry about what other people are doing or thinking about.
One of the many lessons of a yoga practice. So I guess from that place, when you were practicing regularly at level 6, what was your journey then into becoming a yoga teacher?
So I think you probably had a similar experience. As soon as you start practicing with any kind of consistency, and you have that sort of, I was that nerdy student who at the end of class, whenever the teacher says, if you've got any questions, come chat to me, I was always there with a question. And like, now I look back at the questions I was asking, I was like, so why in this first sun salutation did you tell us to have the feet touching, but in the second one you didn't say it? And now I realize most of the time it's just teachers forgetting. Or
Let's give away our secrets.
But I was always like super, super engaged, super interested in the why and the what and the how, always chatting to people in the changing rooms. I think I'd scared a few guys who were probably used to being at the gym where there's no talk. And I'd always be like, hey, how was your practice? What did you think? And so I think it became quite clear to my teachers, as well as to me quite quickly, that was a sort of obvious progression for me from quite early on when I started practicing at level 6. And then, so I was doing some research into it. I was talking to different schools, getting advice from teachers, and then the pandemic happened, and that kind of put my plans on hold for a year. And I'm really glad it did, because it meant that the training that I ended up doing wasn't available before, and then was created, and also meant that I got a year further along with my own practice. And I think we all do our training at the time that is right for us, and it's just a starting point or just a step on the journey. But it felt right for me.
Nice. And when you did that first training, I did the same thing of, I'm fascinated by this, I want to learn more. Were you planning on becoming a yoga teacher? Was that your goal? Or was it, I want to understand more about this practice for myself?
I think I probably said to myself, I'm doing this for myself to learn more about, I'm fascinated in yoga history and philosophy, and I'm fascinated in asana as well. What are the shapes? I'm going to talk more about that later. But so I definitely wanted to learn more for myself. But I also had a feeling that I would want to go on and teach. And then I remember the closing circle of my teacher training, we were each answering the question, like, and looking back or looking ahead, do you think you'll want to go on and teach? And when it got to me, my teacher said, Richard's already a teacher. Richard's been a teacher for years. I used to go on retreats with him, and I'd be like helping people do headstand and answering people's questions for them and talking about yoga philosophy. And it was very clear to him, and he knows me extremely well, and increasingly clear to me that, it was always a path. And then graduated in December 2021, the massive COVID outbreak. It was a really weird time as teachers. There was no physical contact. It was just like everything was so uncertain. And so I was really like, I don't know how I proceed from here. And I'd done my training in Manchester, so I didn't have the same kind of support of my cohort that I might have done if I'd done it in London with a London school. And then one of my great teachers and dear friends, Davina Plant, she's a wonderful woman, so go practice with her. She said, she's like, oh, Richard, can you cover my community class this Sunday? And that was a scary moment. And it wasn't the first class I'd taught, obviously, because I taught my graduation class, I taught friends a few, but it was the first paid, it was the first professional gig.
Yeah.
And also I knew that everyone there would either know me, because it was a class I went to regularly, or they were had come to practice with Davina, who's an incredibly established and incredibly well-respected teacher. So it was a huge pressure. And I will always remember the feeling of walking out of that class being like, make this happen. I was like, this is what you are meant to do. Literally, I was like, got home, started looking for community centers to find a place that I could book for myself, started getting in touch with studios. It just kickstarted it for me. Totally, you know it. Yeah.
It is amazing. I think when you find a practice that has such a huge impact in your own life, it's almost like you have to share it. That was how I felt.
Yeah, totally.
It would be a disservice to the world not to share this practice.
Yeah. I think also, though, some people are very good asana practitioners and they love yoga and it's done great things for them. And so people put pressure on them, not in an unpleasant way, but just in a like, oh, are you going to be a teacher? Are you going to train? And I do know people who have trained for that reason and because they want to deepen their own practice, but have then gone, oh, teaching isn't my path. And that's totally cool. It's totally
100%.
fine.
And I want to touch on, because you also have other work that's not just teaching yoga, because you also are a celebrant.
I'm also a celebrant. So actually
Does it all.
I had a very long career in hospitality. So if you recognize this face and it's not from yoga, it's because I probably served you in a restaurant somewhere in London or Australia. And I absolutely loved that career, but it killed me and I got to burn out. And yoga was definitely a big part of my regrowth, like rebuilding myself from there, which is part of why it's such a beautiful practice. And so when I left that career in hospitality and I was like, oh, I just don't know what comes next. And then I worked with a career coach. Highly recommend that to everyone. If you saw a careers advisor at school and were like, this is useless, seeing a career coach when you've got a bit more life experience and a bit more knowledge of yourself was so good because it gave me the confidence to be like, actually, I can start again in a new career from scratch. And I had a second career working in the charity sector. I worked for St. Mungo's. Just want to give a big shout out to an amazing organisation that works to end homelessness in London and across the south of England. So please do support them. But so I had a career with them. And whilst I was doing that, I also trained as a celebrant. So that's someone who offers usually non-religious weddings, funerals, baby naming ceremonies, transgender renaming ceremonies, kind of you name it. Any big occasion that needs to be marked in a special way, I'll do them. But yeah, my bread and butter is weddings and increasingly funerals. And in many ways, the synergy between hosting customers in a restaurant, holding space for a funeral, and teaching a yoga class are incredibly similar. You have a group of people walk into a room in a disparate set of emotions and mental states, and your responsibility is to bring them together, to guide them through an energetic journey, whatever that kind of means to you, and to help them to work through some stuff. We've all had horrible customers come in who are really rude, and it's not because they've got an issue with you or they're unpleasant people, but as one of my colleagues always used to say, a bird just shat on their coat, or they've just had a rough day.
So true.
And it's one of the great satisfactions of like hosting in restaurants is then people leaving at the end of the night being like, oh, thank you so much. We've had the best evening. We feel great. And just like with yoga, just like with weddings, I haven't done that, but I've helped facilitate that for them. And with yoga particularly, you're very much just holding the space for people to do that for themselves, which is why it's so important not to put your teacher on a pedestal, because they are just supporting you. You're the one doing the work. But yeah, so been a celebrant for nearly 6 years now, and it's just incredible. It's so rewarding. It gives a good balance to my life as a teacher. I teach almost full time, therefore. And yeah, just I meet amazing people at all different stages of life and hopefully get to make weddings even more joyful, like really maximize the joy, make them as bloody awesome and brilliant and unique and personal as possible. And for funerals, also make them more joyful, more celebratory, and help people who might be wondering, like, how the hell do I honor this person's life? Most of the time, the people I work with have never done this before. And it's such a privilege to help people to celebrate someone's life in the way that is true to the deceased, but also to the bereaved, because it's individual for every single person, every single family, every single group of friends. And yeah, so facilitating and supporting people to get to that right way of celebrating life is just amazing. I love it.
I love what you were saying about the synergy between all three of those disciplines. I worked in hospitality myself pretty much my whole, like, up until teaching. Also, my mum is a celebrant, so I feel so close to all three of those disciplines, and I'm a full-time teacher, and I completely feel you. There's so much ritual within all of those things, you know, the joy in eating out, the community, the connection with a yoga class, like the processing of emotions. That's so relevant for all three of those things. It's really, I love hearing about people's careers and the winding paths, and like you said about, you can start again, and that's exactly what I've done as well. And sometimes that feels really scary.
But I've often said to people who are in their early mid-20s, in their early 30s, who are like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm really lost. And I'm like, babe, I was really lost for a really long time. Not so much lost, but I was just uncertain of where I was going. And I loved hospitality, but I also knew that it wasn't what I was meant to do. But I designed myself to, I was like, okay, that's just what I am going to do. It's what I'm good at.
Yeah.
And now it feels amazing to have, here's a cringe moment, on Hinge. I was answering the prompt the other day, my dream job, if money didn't matter. And I was like, I already have both my dream jobs. Like literally, I have my vocations in the like classical sense of the word. They are both like callings. I feel like I'm called to do them. And yeah, it's just how amazing. But I couldn't have done them, particularly funerals, could not have done those when I left university. Like you need a certain amount of life experience and wisdom and empathy. And yeah, that's just for me took until the ripe old age that I've achieved.
That actually leads me really nicely onto the next thing that I want to chat about, which is so often in our lives, we have these moments of shifting, of transformation, whether that's a new job, a new relationship, whether you're grieving, you've lost a loved one, or any of these things, curveballs that life throws at you. And we've already spoken about a couple of those, but what I want to dive back into is about your yoga practice or a yoga practice and how that can support those changes. Because even everything you've already said about the transformations and the holding space and the emotions, it's for me been the thing that has pulled me through a lot of change and a lot of transformation and helped me navigate that complex path. And I think it's the same with a lot of people. Like yoga can be so much more than what often we go to a 1 hour yoga practice for. Maybe you don't even realize what you're getting from that 1 hour yoga practice. But yeah, has there been any points in your life of whether it's been a difficult phase or just a big period of change where it's felt maybe uneasy, that your yoga practice has helped you through?
I think I went through most of the, let's say, crisis and most of the bigger challenges actually before I started a consistent yoga practice. But now I know that, along with a few other things, yoga is part of a set of tools that I have that give me resilience, that help me navigate life, better understand myself, how I respond to things. We never complete yoga. You're never done. You know, your students always ask you that, don't they? They're like, oh, but why do you still go to classes? And I'm like, because I haven't finished. But also because, yeah, I know that it's one of the things that if you know me, I'm a pretty joyful person. That's because I've spent a lot of time working to get to that point, to be able to maintain that, because I know the things that really matter. Having a cup of tea in bed and reading my book in the morning is like vital. Unfortunately, I teach a lot of early morning classes, which I love, but they do get in the way of that. But yeah, and my yoga practice is a big part of that. And I know that, and I notice if I have a week where I don't get to the mat much in some form, or where all of my practice is kind of in service of other people through teaching, then I notice that takes a toll. And but there's also like a bigger picture. I've journaled for 20 plus years. And I use journaling as a tool to observe those shifts so I can understand better the benefits of it. And I do think insidious is a negative sounding word, but yoga's effects are insidious. You can just show up and do a 45-minute like power yoga class in a gym every week. And it's still a good thing. And it's still going to be working this magic on you internally. And often there's a lot of shade cast on the shape making. And there is too much attachment to making shapes. But also, we all have a body. It's the one thing that we can say for sure about us here and now. And the ancient yogis, however many thousand years ago, we all lived in a body. And yoga is this practice of embodiment, or for many of us, re-embodiment, particularly if you've experienced trauma or too much Instagram. You can get really detached from the body. And yoga is this practice of re-embodiment, but it's slow and gradual. And the shape making is a joyful and celebratory way. And let's not undervalue how good it is to just feel good in your body. If I can keep going on, that shape making can look like handstands. Awesome, so much fun, love it. Also, I teach chair yoga. My oldest student was 97. We're not doing handstands in that class, spoiler alert. But Sheila, she was amazing. And she would say at the end of every class, I just feel so good for that. Oh. I was like, yeah, there's a community of people who show up every week. Shout out to Doreen. If she's listening to this, she's a legend. There's a community of people who show up every week, and we all connect and we talk and we move, get back into our bodies that increasingly might feel like they're betraying you as you get older. And actually, we still need to celebrate them. We still need to find the joy in our bodies, because it's the one thing we're also all going to have until we die. And then I teach another chair yoga class, which is for people with chronic mental health disorders. So that's a whole different kettle of fish, really wide range of ages and abilities. But a lot of people who are living through the trauma of their mental health and how society has supported or not supported them with that. And I've had some really lovely conversations with my students there, and it's on a hospital ward, about just the little changes they felt through doing a little bit of meditation or a little bit of breath or a little bit of movement. And sometimes it's just silly movement, and I just get them all laughing. We'll get up out of the chair, because there isn't a whole lot of laughter in hospitals. And sometimes that's just, so like yoga is this incredibly powerful set of tools, and it just doesn't need to be reduced to like one single thing. It's, what is it for you? You make
all
it
of
up.
it so different.
Yeah.
Do you still do both of those chair yoga classes?
Yeah, still do both of them. Yeah,
Are they available to the public? Where are they?
Oh, so the hospital one, no.
no.
That's on a ward. But it was one of my students who's a psychiatrist who connected me with her work, which is amazing. And then the second one is at Oru Space in East Dulwich. So massive shout out to them for going along with me when I said 2.5 years ago, I was like, we need to do more. We need to offer yoga for the community. Because I don't know if you know this, but yoga studios aren't necessarily the most welcoming spaces for people who aren't able-bodied. And Oru jumped at it. They were so cool about it. So we started off with this monthly offering, and then we agreed that it needed to be more consistent. So that's a free class every Wednesday at 3 p.m. And we've had, my oldest student was 97, but I've had someone who was 9 months pregnant, and I've had people recovering from surgery who are just not able to load-bearing exercise, all sorts of things, all sorts of people. So it's a great one for anyone who's new to yoga as well, very comfortable, very safe space. Or if you just know someone who's like a bit intimidated by the idea of getting into a class or can't afford it because it's free.
So good. So good. Definitely jump on that for anyone who's intrigued. So beautiful to have a space where Oru Space also do free community meditations at lunch. And it's a great studio we both teach at. I guess when we're talking about the making shapes, or the asana as it's called in Sanskrit, that is how I and how many people do get into the world of yoga. And you're doing these physical classes and you feel amazing, you feel strong, and you're moving and you feel like you're opening yourself. And maybe there's often a reason that people are coming back that's deeper than that, but they might not necessarily know it. So I often get people staying back like, but I feel so good after that class. How do I feel so good from just moving my body? Like I do get that kind of question reframed a lot. And sometimes it's really difficult to digest and comprehend these bigger philosophic concepts in yoga tradition, ancient yogic texts. You come into it, especially in the West, from this physical standpoint, but there is just so much more. For maybe a listener who is newer on their yoga journey, I want to get a little bit deeper into the juiciness of what is a yoga practice beyond the physical body. I know that's a big, deep question.
It's a big, deep question.
And we're never going to be able to cover all of that, by the way, in this short episode.
So I think yoga philosophy is like huge and complex and thorny and disputed and appropriated and reappropriated. And there's so many different texts and so many different thinkers. And I'm going to make some recommendations. They'll be in the show notes so that you can follow up on them. And I try, and in all my classes, I always talk a bit about philosophy, and I try and present it always as a question. Like, I am profoundly averse to dogma. I'm profoundly averse to anyone, particularly a white male from London, trying to tell you what yoga is. I think we define it for ourselves. We discover it for ourselves, and that's really important that we do. And so I see my role as helping people with some prompts, with some suggestions. I'm working in my classes at the moment with a really beautiful image. I'm not taking credit for it. It comes from an amazing book I'm reading, which talks about the yoga practice. And it's very celebratory of the yoga practice rather than, the shapes are bad, we must do the meditation. But it talks about the yoga practice as art. And so if we think of Jackson Pollock, for instance, the drips that he splashes on his canvas have no meaning, like no meaning inheres in those splashes of paint. But if you go to the Tate and you look at one of his incredible paintings, like 2.5 meters long, you're just entranced, you just swim in that painting. You are, as the audience, making meaning. So just that, like that bit of canvas in a frame, you make meaning through feeling, probably. If you're looking at like a realist painting, there's a lot more, oh, this is what the painter is telling us because it's realist. Whereas once you get to impressionism, expressionism, and then abstract expressionism, which is what like excites me, and it excites me in like creative writing as well. That's a different podcast.
Episode 2.
Once you get to abstract expressionism, there's lots of speculation. Is he painting fractals? Is he trying to describe the creation of the universe through his paintings? There's lots of ways we can try and project meaning, but again, don't be an art critic. Don't tell people what to think. Let people feel it. So coming back to yoga, this book I'm reading, posits this idea that the yoga practitioner is both the artist, they are the art through their practice, and they are the audience. So they make these shapes that have no meaning in themselves. But through the production of the shapes, through this kind of dance, they then experience sensation or feeling. And then that is the meaning making. You make meaning from that. And so there's a very new, very contemporary, this book was published 2 months ago, take on it. But I'm also profoundly inspired by the model of the koshas, which is an ancient model, like an ancient Vedic model from the Taittiriya Upanishad, written in like the 13th century before the Common Era, which talks about these 5 layers of the self, from the gross outer, flesh and bones, the Annamaya kosha, all the way through to the bliss body, this most subtle expression of the self, Anandamaya kosha. And that for me is what yoga is. It's a journey inwards through these layers of the self. And that's what Iyengar calls it as well, the inward journey. And it's often called the journey from the self, through the self, to the self. And all these books, all these texts, all these ideas, they're all just different frameworks to help us find a way of making meaning through the shapes that we make. And I think there's a tendency or a desire to be like, but how do I do this pose right? Now, you'll find some dogmatic teachers out there who will tell you that there's a right way to do it, but I just don't believe that's true. There's no reference to Janu Shirshasana, for instance, before 1930. The pose was made up. Obviously, people had made that shape before it. You make it all the time, and tying your shoelaces. But there's no textual reference to it before 1930. So let's not be like, there's this true and authentic and ancient way of doing it.
This knee has to be here.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when you look around a yoga class and it is diverse. A lot of my yoga classes, I have big, strong guys, super muscly. I have older people, and that's going to look different in every single body. So when you say a warrior 2 and you're standing with your arms open and front knee bent, it's going to look completely different. And when you look across the room, and that's also the beauty in it. And
I think I try and teach poses from week to week a little bit differently. So I'll bring a bit different intention into Warrior 2. So people, and if you've been to my classes, I can be quite pedantic as a teacher. I'm quite like, put the hand here, no, more like this, more like that. Because I'm trying to get you to feel more. I'm trying to get you more and more present in your body and like through those layers of the body, but never leaving the body, because that's the only thing we all have.
There might be 30 people sometimes. And the power in that of having all these people sharing space, sharing energy, moving, and even though they might not understand the full levels of the subtle body or the 5 koshas, it's like that is happening. It's physically happening. You can observe it as a teacher in whatever way you want. But I feel like that is the ultimate power in it, because you are literally watching people go through that journey in that 1-hour yoga class.
Yeah.
And leave. Sometimes people burst through the door and roll out their mat and drop their water bottle and just be so all over the place. And you'll watch them leave in a completely different headspace.
Yeah.
They're like, thank you, I needed that. And even just that physical transformation is, wow, that's it. That is yoga.
Yeah. I think as well, it's important to acknowledge that some of that comes down to the endorphin release of doing exercise. And so there is huge value in just doing exercise, 100%. What's important for us as teachers is remembering to find that balance between, cool, I can get you to do loads of dynamic stuff and you'll feel really good and it'll be good for your body as long as I'm teaching you well and you're practicing in a safe way.
Making your art.
Yeah, making your art, doing your Jackson Pollock. So we can make people feel great that way. And we can be like, boom, right up to the last 2 minutes of the class, drop them into Shavasana. You lie there sweating and panting. The teacher comes over, gives you a head rub. Oh, transcendental experience. And that's a bit of a false epiphany because it's the quiet stuff. It's the also trying to find the same focus in a simple seated pose, for instance, Janu Shirshasana, trying to stay as present there as you had to when you were in Warrior 3, for instance, where you're like, I have to focus because otherwise I'll fall over.
I'll fall over, yeah.
And this week, for instance, I've been teaching all my seated poses with eyes closed because I'm like, otherwise you go into a forward fold and immediately everyone's looking at their toes. And so I'm trying to get people to find that same level of focus and attention in Butterfly as they had in Warrior 3. Because it's, this is where you're still doing the yoga. And this is one of the things that differentiates it from doing a HIIT class, which will also make you feel great. But like, we know that yoga is something more and different and more complex. And we've all been guilty of it as teachers, being like, oh God, I've run out of time. So quickly slam them into Shavasana straight from wheel. And they're like, buzzing. And I think that's our constant challenge as teachers, is to try and have that energetic structure to the class that takes them on a journey and leaves them not on this euphoric high. It's great. Everyone comes up to you, high fives you, and is like, I feel so amazing. But like, they also do that coming out of a HIIT class. So don't be like, wow, I made everyone feel so good. What's like sometimes really interesting is people leave a class very quietly and very introspectively. And they might still come up and chat to you, but there's
a shift.
And that's, okay, maybe it's less validating to see than that pump. But I also think that's where the work is happening.
100%. What does your personal practice look like? On the mat, off the mat?
Yeah, so when you train as a teacher, teachers will always say to you, I'm sure you had this as well, don't lose your own practice. It's so important, blah, blah, blah.
It's easy to lose because you're teaching loads at studios.
You teach at all the good times. Yeah. And then students are like, as I said before, like, why are you still practicing? Like, you're a teacher now. So I try and make it to between 4 and 6 classes a week if I can.
Wow.
I know, right?
That's impressive. I know how much this guy teaches.
Yeah, but it's so important to me.
Is.
And I love it. I am always trying to cultivate a self-practice. I find it very hard, the discipline of being like, going to sit down, we're going to roll out my mat and I'm going to set aside as long as I need or want. That's very hard. You get distracted by the dust bunnies or by Instagram or by the music or whatever. So I do try and do a certain amount of self-practice. At the moment, it's like once or twice a week.
Yeah.
And then I try and go to a few classes. There's 1 or 2 classes that I've been going to very consistently for a very long time, particularly Chatty Wednesdays at Yoga Rise with Helen Russell Clark. That's a weekly non-negotiable for me. It's a super important part of my practice, her teaching, the community of people, and my own physical and mental practice. And then I also teach a guided meditation on Monday mornings. So that's, for me, I do it over Zoom, and it's a way of starting my week with intention, in the same way that we started this podcast with a meditation. When I started teaching it, I'd noticed this huge shift in how I then taught my first class after it in the morning. Because I was like, oh, I'm like in this very different headspace. Really lovely.
We'll pop that in the show notes as well for anyone who wants to jump on that.
Yeah, please do join.
Really beautiful.
It's like £2.
Yeah.
And I had allowed myself to I was teaching a little bit too much. I tend to say yes to all the covers because I love covering. I love teaching. So when people are like, oh, do you want to cover? I'm like, of course I do, because I love teaching. And then suddenly you realize, oh, I'm teaching 7 days this week and doing 2 funerals. Gosh, that's a whole lot of
energy out, not in. Yeah.
So I did a very important thing earlier this year, and I went on a yoga retreat. I didn't go on one last year, and I really felt it. And every single day I journaled, every single day I practiced, but I didn't teach.
What a gift.
What a gift. And I came back with so much clarity on my own practice, on my own teaching. I've set up 2 like yoga reading groups, study groups since then, reading different texts or doing online courses. And that has just boosted me so much. So my own practice, like off the mat, does look like I've always got at least one yoga history or philosophy book on the go, try to be discussing those with different people. And as well as practicing with my like favorite teachers I love, I make a point of practicing with new teachers. It's really hard to get feedback when you start out as a teacher because your friends come and they're like, oh my God, it was amazing. I loved it. You're like,
tell me how you really feel.
Yeah, tell me how you really feel.
Feedback is also a gift. And I think some people find it hard to give honest feedback because, especially as a friend, because you don't want to upset someone, but actually giving constructive feedback is...
And I would never give feedback that's not unasked for. But when, you know, specifically friends who are doing their teacher training or have recently graduated say they'll ask me to, or we discuss it and it comes up, I'm always like, I love to do that because there's just these little things that people want reassurance on or want to ask questions about.
Habits that we get stuck in ourselves. And
oh, don't. When people are like, oh, just that you always say this word.
Yeah. It happens. That's aside from yoga, that just happens. I used to work in corporate and we would all just speak this corporate lingo that when I left, I realized no one uses those words apart from this office.
Yeah.
Very funny.
And then there's also like a danger that everyone wants to include yoga philosophy in their classes, which is brilliant. And we all should do if it feels authentic and right. But what gets me is when I see people just repeating content that they've read on Instagram or repeating something that another teacher says. And it's like, oh, that's not your voice. Those aren't your words. And it's like totally fine to reinterpret what someone else has said. But you need to feel it and believe it. And to me, it's really transparent when people say things that aren't sincere.
That they haven't embodied or felt themselves.
Yeah, totally. Or when they're like, say things as facts, which are not facts. So a classic one, for instance, is people will talk about the core text of yoga, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and they'll say, oh, this text is 2,500 years old. And it's just not. The academic research is that it's maybe 1,600 years old, which is a big difference. Because if we think something is old, we give it more power, more credibility, more credence. And it's like, we need to recognize that it's not an ancient text. And it's also not a Bible. It is not like the breviary of yoga. It doesn't, it is just a perspective. It is an interpretation. It's a framing of what yoga philosophy and practice was at that moment in time by an individual or maybe a group of people. And so when people are kind of like, well, it says this, so therefore we must do this. I'm like, but why? I like have a huge respect for the text. I have the first line of it tattooed on my arm. Atta yoga anushasanam. Now the teaching of yoga begins. Because it's like the only thing I know, the only thing I can be certain of in that text, and the only thing I really know about yoga is that it's always here and now. We can always be in yoga, and we want to be. So yeah, it was a bit of a rambling side track there.
I love it.
But yeah, I feel very strongly that we need to be well informed in what we say and approach it with a critical consciousness. Don't just regurgitate something. Say something upon which you have reflected. And which you've felt, you've embodied, you've experienced, you've understood. And if you haven't understood it, then maybe don't share it.
I always say what you mean and mean what you say.
Preach this.
You know, actually also again brings me really nicely to the next thing. So I think we've shared so much about a few different books. If someone listening to this is wanting to maybe dive a little bit deeper into their yoga practice or thinking, oh, I'm interested to understand more about that. What are your favorite texts? Are there any books that you revisit from your first teacher training, or is there anything that you think, yeah, that's had a big effect in my life?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this question a lot. I think about this a lot anyway, and I've got a list of books that I do recommend to people when they ask. And when I run my own teacher trainings one day, I've got a good idea of the kind of text that will be on there. But it's really hard to reduce it because there are so many texts out there. I've read quite a lot, like barely scratched the surface, but like I've got a big interest in this and constantly buying more from eBay.
Yeah.
But I think a few key recommendations. I'll start with A Queer Dharma by Jacoby Ballard, because there is not enough representation of the theys and the gays in yoga or in yoga literature. And yeah, A Queer Dharma kind of reimagines what yoga can be for a diverse audience. And it's full of applied, practical, physical practices and meditation practices, which I just think is a wonderful way to approach yoga. Let's be celebratory of its potential, not it must be these things, or is this what it is for me, so that's what it should be for you. So yeah, A Queer Dharma, first recommendation. Second one, this is great for people who are just getting started, also for people who want like a great text to come back to, which is The Truth of Yoga. I think the name is a bit ironic because there's no truth really of yoga, or no one truth. The Truth of Yoga by Daniel Simpson. It's written as like a series of very short chapters, or kind of almost like blog posts that talk about the Vedas or talk about the 8 limbs of yoga. So it's really good as a reference book, a very accessible reference book. You can just go back to time and again to be like, yeah, what was the Rig Veda? I can't remember. So that's a great text. And he's a great teacher. He's very accessible. For more specialized learning, massive shout out to yogicstudies.com. Amazing website set up by Seth Powell, who's an American academic. He's incredibly knowledgeable, but presents yoga philosophy in very accessible and very interesting ways. And he's set up this wonderful platform. The trainings are all Yoga Alliance accredited, and he has just renowned yoga academics from all over the world, from India as well as from England, as well as from the States and elsewhere, women as well as men, people of color, teaching courses on really diverse topics. So there'll be someone who's translated an obscure 15th century text who will run a course that is a deep reading of that text about something about yoga.
Love that.
So really good platform. That's great. I did some courses on there before I trained as a teacher. You don't need to be a teacher at all to do things there. And it's pretty essential that we all read some kind of translation or version of the Yoga Sutras. My preferred one, although this is quite a beast, is Edwin Bryant's version, because there's a lot of historical context, and he synthesizes the 5 kind of key commentaries, Indian commentaries, on the text. So gives the most perspectives, whereas most other texts are like one person giving their perspective. That was the one in my 200. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's a beast, but it really, and it talks a lot about like yoga's connections with Buddhism, and talks about lots of principles that are really helpful to understand. So that is a great one. And then I think this should be compulsory reading on all teacher trainings, which is Practice and All Is Coming by Matthew Rimsky, which talks about the abuse scandal around Patabi Joyce and Ashtanga. It was written a few years ago now, maybe coming up for 10 years. It's just been republished. It's edited by Maitri Pushkar, who's a wonderful Buddhist monk. She's married to Norman Blair, who's a wonderful yin teacher. But this book is just fascinating because it talks about the dynamics and the potential for like cult dynamics within yoga, within any group. And I would say reading it made me rethink my own practice. And it really made me rethink being a teacher and how I teach. And I think that's so important. You know, there are stories of abuse coming out all the time. And so many people who come to yoga come there because they're going through change, because they are vulnerable, because they have experienced something. So I would say there's a disproportionately high representation of vulnerable people, of traumatized people within the yoga world. And then there's a lot of charismatic old men, unfortunately, who abuse that. And this book really digs into that. And I think therefore can equip us with tools as teachers to more safely teach, more safely hold space, and as students to more safely protect ourselves from those unfortunately predatory men.
That's definitely going on my list. I've not read that one.
So good.
I'll get it from you.
Final recommendation is Yoga and the Body by Edward Clark and Laurie Green, which is where I was talking about this idea of the yoga practitioner as artist, art, and audience. So this text it's quite academic, so it's not an easy read, but it's rich. You read a paragraph and you're like, I'm getting a lot out of this. And I think what I love about it is that it's going, okay, what is yoga? What is yoga now? What is it going to be? What is its potential? Yes, it looks back historically, but it's very much looking forward. And it's looking forward in an expansive way, in a celebratory way, in a way that goes, how can we be like, yoga can be more than just, I feel great. And it underscores the idea of yoga as an outward looking and potentially political practice, or politicized practice, and not just an inward personal one. And I think that's something I'm always trying to come back to, is like, yes, I use it to make myself more resilient, but I also use it to make myself more compassionate, more empathetic, and better placed and better resourced to be a good citizen.
Be better, do better.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. Lots of recommendations. We'll make sure those are all in the notes. No, it's really helpful for me as well. We're going to move on to the final part of this podcast, although we could sit here and chat all day.
Oh my God. If anyone wants to talk about yoga, please get in touch.
You know where to go. I want to call this part of the podcast Final Flow, and it's quick fire, okay? No prep. I haven't sent these questions to Richard before.
Oh no.
First thing that comes to your head, we go for it. So we're going to start with, what's your favorite yoga pose?
Changes all the time, but at the moment, let's say extended side angle, utita pajvakonasana.
One that you really dislike when you're in a class and the teacher comes into it and you go, oh, it doesn't feel good in my body.
Shoulder stand. I don't really get the point of it. But
Fair
I've got
enough.
a nice variation on the back.
Okay, we'll have a go. What is an essential item in your yoga bag other than your mat?
What, for teaching?
Just in your belongings?
No, nothing. And I'm trying to move away from using a mat. Like, we don't need anything.
Wow.
You don't need to spend money to do yoga. You really don't. You don't need a special body. You don't need special socks. You don't need an expensive yoga mat.
Stuff.
You just don't need stuff.
Less stuff. I love it.
Less stuff. Less stuff, more breath, more movement, more feeling.
What's your dream retreat location?
So I went to Costa Rica on holiday when I was 15. Best travel experience of my life. It was incredible. Spent like 3 weeks there. There's like saw 4 different types of monkey, and I can't even count the number of different butterflies and moths and cockroaches and all sorts. I know, weird, right? So I would love to host a retreat there, I think. But I'm very conscious of the enormous carbon footprint and a questionable impact of us doing retreats all around the world.
That is true. What's your current obsession outside of yoga?
Ooh, current obsession outside of yoga. So my number one passion before yoga was always language, particularly reading. And at the moment, I'm going through a really good reading spell. I'm like burning through the fiction. I'm in a book club, but also I've just asked a load of students to give me recommendations for books. Now I've got loads of book recommendations, and I've kept a record of who recommended each one. So once I finish it, I can then go to that person and have a chat with them about it. Because I love talking. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
I think literature is an unbelievable tool to also get to know yourself, to go on the inward journey through the self. And so I'm loving being in a reading spell. When you've got that, like, I've got a little moment to myself. When you said the
morning tea with that's my favorite thing. Morning matcha, get back into bed with my book on my one morning that I don't teach, and I love it.
Okay, but matcha should be banned.
Do not agree. Amazing. Richard, we're going to wrap up the podcast. So I want to just ask you one final thing. Where can people find you, on Instagram, online? Do you have anything coming up that you want to talk about or share? Because for anyone who's enjoyed this conversation, as I have so loved every single part of it, that wants to join your morning meditations or your chair yoga or potential upcoming retreats, like how can we find out about that?
Yeah, so I teach a lot of classes a week across a lot of studios in South London. Best way to find me is through Instagram. My handle is Peckamism because I'm so pessimistic.
You said that before.
So awful. And I don't have a website right now because I have a professional one as for my Celebrant business, the londonCelebrant.co. So do look me up there. But yeah, so if you're not on Instagram, then I have a mailing list that you can subscribe to, and I do occasional newsletters. And I love teaching private, so I have a few different privates going on at the moment. One is entirely focused on inversions, so it's all about the shape making. And one we do almost no movement. We talk about yoga history and philosophy and breath. And so I love to work with people one-on-one to help them to get as much as they can get out of yoga, make yoga what it is for them. So yeah, get in touch if you're interested in that.
Cool. I will make sure, like I said, that all of those links, books, everything is below. Wow. I feel so full and happy, and I love to hear people's stories and journeys and tips, and I just feel really inspired. So thank you so much to everyone who's joined and listened to this first episode of Off the Mats.
I'm very honored.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. I can't wait to see where this podcast goes. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a little like, a cheeky comment, let me know your thoughts or the favorite part of the conversation. Hit subscribe, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode. Richard, thank you so much.
Christy, thank you. Oh, that was wonderful. I loved it. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this chat, why not share it with a friend? You can find me on Instagram at Christy Night Yoga, or you can subscribe to Off the Mat Podcast to be notified for next week's episode. See you then.